Hsa Plan presents Tax Time with Jeff Levine. Let's talk taxes.
Longtime viewers might recognize I am not Roger Pine. I'm Ben Birken, the Vice President of Customer Success and User Engagement at Hsa Plan. I'm filling in for Roger while he was out doing something meaningful with his family, or so we are led to believe. But Jeff, it's great to be with you. Happy to
It's
see
good to
you
be
again.
with you too. It's nice to see Roger take some time away from work for a change.
I know, right? You know,
Yeah.
you gotta get him in his minivan out touring the country. I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing.
I love it.
Well, I'm glad to have the opportunity. You and I haven't had a chance to record in a little while, so it's nice to get this band back together.
Yeah.
We thought we would take some time now, as we're kind of getting closer to tax filing deadline for this year, to talk about those handful of things that folks can do in the current calendar year, but still have an impact on the previous tax year.
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned, you used a great word there, a handful, because it literally is about a handful of things, right? There's not more than 4 or 5 things that you can really do now that can meaningfully impact last year's return. Essentially, once you get to December 31st and the clock strikes midnight, most of that year's tax situation is kind of locked in. However, there are still a few things. The leading kind of group, if you will, would be contributions of some kind. So we could start with IRA contributions, right? Generally, you have up until the tax filing deadline to make an IRA contribution. That includes both your deductible, which would be a tax reducing move, your deductible IRA contributions, as well as your non-deductible and/or Roth IRA contributions, which, while not necessarily lowering your taxes for last year, could help you to keep your taxes lower in the future. Now, along with that, you also have HSA contributions. Again, HSA contributions, same type of deal, up until the tax filing deadline. And what's critical here is that when we're talking about IRA and Roth IRA and HSA contributions, it is literally the filing deadline, not extensions, right? So if you file an extension and you push your due date out until October 15th, great for your tax return, not going to help you with respect to IRA and HSA contributions.
Interesting. But there are some, I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, there are some that actually you do have until your extension filing deadline.
That's right. So for years, we had the ability to fund a SEP IRA, not only to fund it, but in some cases to create a SEP that didn't exist, and to both create it, establish it, and fund it for the prior year up until the business's filing date. And that does include extensions. So talking about, let's say a sole proprietor being able to go out until October 15th of this year to make a SEP contribution for last year. Pretty darn powerful stuff there. But that's not the only one. It was the only one for a very long time. Then the Tax Cut and Jobs Act came, sorry, not the Tax Cut, the Secure Act came along. And the Secure Act, back in 2019, effective for the 2020 tax year, created or allowed new types of retirement accounts to be both established and funded for the prior year. So this would include profit sharing plans, annuity purchase plans, and even pension plans. That's a really big one, because some people with a pension plan or with let's say a huge tax liability, they can use a pension plan to dramatically reduce their income there. I mean, we're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of contributions to a pension plan, in some cases, dropping income significantly.
Absolutely. So I heard you mention SEP IRAs, solo 401ks is one that we hear about on the Hsa Plan side too. If I'm remembering, the extension is the deadline is the same for funding, but maybe not the same for setting them up. Do I remember that right?
Well, so it's a little bit complicated in that there are multiple elements, right? Often to a solo 401k, because you might have the profit sharing element of it that can be funded up, but that's essentially like the profit sharing plan, right? So that can be funded up to the due date. The salary deferral, this is one of those where it's not gray in the law, it's gray in the application of the law, because you have to identify the deferral amount by December 31st of the prior year, right? So clearly, if you don't have a plan in place, you can't identify deferral amount. So you've got to have the plan. But what if you have the plan in place and you're just like, I'll figure it out later, right? Like, how do you identify this amount on December 31st? And oftentimes it just works in the sense like, I will put the maximum amount of salary deferral in, right? If you're a solo 401k, maybe you don't get to the full 20,000 because you don't have enough profit or whatever it may be, but you have to identify that salary deferral by the end of the calendar year, and it can be contributed to up to the filing deadline, but you want to get that in sooner rather than later if you can.
Sure. Couple of other things though, in our handful, right, in our basket, some things related to elections, right, that you might still be able to do in the current year.
That's correct. So our last real grouping of tools are the things that we can do now to make certain tax elections for stuff we already did. So this, to be clear, this is already completed actions. Now we're just deciding what we want to do, how we want to treat those actions. So a couple of examples here would be, I want to take like bonus depreciation or something like that, right? If you purchased a piece of equipment, you can depreciate it over a number of years. And in some cases, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you think your tax rate will be higher in the future, then obviously you want to maximize those deductions when you're at the highest rate, or at least that would get you the biggest bang for the buck. Sometimes people want the cash flow now, and even though it's not the highest, not biggest bang for your buck, you take the depreciation today just to get the cash. But that's where sitting down with a good tax plan or a good financial advisor to work through your cash flow, in addition to your paper gains and losses, is helpful. Also, things like an installment sale, right? Like, do you want to have an installment sale when you sell a piece of qualifying property, or do you want to record it all now? Again, if you look at what the future tax rates might be, if you think they might go up, well, maybe you're better off just kind of bringing in all that income today and not having an installment sale. Alternatively, lots of times people like to spread that out, and that would reduce your tax liability because you're only reporting the gain for the portion of the sale proceeds that you received so far. So stuff like that is still a move on the tax return. But again, we're talking about a very limited group of things: your IRA contributions, your HSA contributions, your retirement plan contributions, and then your elections. And that is largely the group of moves that most taxpayers have at their disposal.
Yeah, I think that's key, right? Most taxpayers, right? I think there's one other one that we talked about before we started recording, but just there are certain trusts, right, where the trustee has the discretion to pay something out or not.
Yep.
And that can be done even after the calendar year is over, and almost kind of has to be, because you don't really truly know the income and what could be distributed from the trust until January, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd get a 65-day reprieve in that example to go out into the following year. So we're past that for 2022. And it's worth noting that on a personal income tax basis, the only thing that could do really is to increase it, right? Because either the trust is going to give it to you or not. And now it may be more efficient overall for the trust to give that to you, but from a personal income tax bill point of view, the only thing it could do is increase your taxes for the year.
Right. You can't say, I took this income, I actually want the trust to pay it.
Yes. Right? I mean, that would be nice. Good.
That's right. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for these handful of things. Again, current year stuff that you can apply to last year's taxes. So, important topic now, because we're kind of running up against a deadline for people to make some of those decisions. But as always, thank you so much for your time and your pearls of wisdom.
Dude, it's good to be with you, and let Roger stay out on the road. Well, let's do this again. Let's run this back.
Fair enough. Yeah, Roger, take another week. Just keep going. Just keep driving as far as that tank of gas will take you. Although these days you probably want to maximize your mileage on your gas too, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
All right. All right. Until next time, this has been Tax Time with Jeff Levine. Ben Birken from Holistic Plan, wishing you a good rest of your week. Thank you so much.